on Monday, this is a story in a couple of different acts. The two acts, and then there's an epilogue, and there's multiple scenes in it. On Monday, I was on my way to meet a new friend, a colleague, for lunch, and I'm walking to this coffee shop, and I was already in the crosswalk when this box truck, this like construction truck, comes turning into the crosswalk, barreling through, and just barely clears me. It's one of those situations where in the crosswalk, you would see the pedestrian and slow down. This guy didn't slow down. And I looked, giant sign on the side of the truck, all capital letters, Trump. This is on Monday. And I thought that's a little too on the nose. Oh, universe, to almost get run over by a Trump dump truck. This is the day before the election, and his window was down. And since he almost hit me, I'm not the hero of the story, by the way, but I didn't swear. I was proud of that. But I did say, "Hey, watch it." And he didn't even respond or acknowledge me. He just kept driving. So that was that. That's scene one. Scene two. We're act one, scene two now. Keep walking to the coffee shop. 2 blocks later, I see the truck again. He's parked at a construction site. And I'm about a block away. And I stop and I look at the truck and I see the guy. And I'm standing there wondering, should I say something again? Now, many of you are thinking, no, you should not say something again. You already said something. But I'm standing there, just still trying to process what happened and figure out, is this a moment of, approach or just moving on? Well, as I'm standing there thinking about what to do, this couple came walking their dog and looked at the truck with me. And I said, "Hey, I just got almost hit by that truck. Do you know anything about him?" They're like, "Oh, yeah, that guy has been driving recklessly around the neighborhood for months." And I was like, "Oh, okay, so I'm not the only one." And we kind of talked this through, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm debating whether I should go say something again." And the guy said, "Well, yeah, usually I tend to say something in those situations." And there was something about him saying that made me think, I'm not going to say something. Because I could see myself doing that. I thought, what, I don't need this. So I walked away and went and had coffee, lunch with a new friend. So that's the end of Act 1. That's Monday. Well, you know what Tuesday was? That was the election. Act 2, same story. I thought it was over then. Friday, I'm out running, and I see that same truck with the same Trump sign parked in a place that I'm pretty sure was illegal. And so, again, I told you I'm not the hero of the story. As I run by, same truck, the guy that almost hit me, I just said, "You can't park there, buddy," and kept running. Well, he did not like that. And so he went off on me. And it was just saying all kinds of stuff. And one of the things that he says was, "This is not my truck." Now, I don't know. It looked a lot like the guy who's driving it before, but maybe not. He's like, "It's not my truck." And I'm still running as I, do this. And so I was like, I might have gotten this wrong. I should apologize for that. So I turn around over my shoulder and say, "Okay, my bad. I'm sorry." I think it's important to apologize when we get stuff wrong. And I felt like maybe I was a little antagonistic or something. So I apologized to the guy. And that was scene 1 of Friday. So scene 2 of Act 2, I should have like a chart here. So I circle back around. This time I'm on the other side of the street because I both want to see if I can figure out who this guy is, just to put a face with it. But also I'm on the other side of the street from where he was, trying to not, and maybe I should have just run somewhere else. Like I said, I'm not the hero of the story. But I'm running on the other side, and this guy happens to be right there in the crosswalk where I'm running. And as I'm running this way, he dodges this way, and then I'm running this way, and he dodges. He's like trying to stop me. So I stop. I have to stop, and I apologize again. Same guy who was that I had said I'm sorry to. Yeah, on Friday, and I think it's the same guy as Monday. Still not sure, but I apologize. I said, "Hey, I'm sorry. I think I got it wrong." And this guy just goes off on me. Calls me, well, I can't repeat everything he said. Called me a something liberal, called me a sore loser. And I said, you don't know anything about my politics. And the fact that he called me a sore loser made me think maybe that was the guy driving the Trump truck. I'm like putting this together. No, this is Friday now. The results were in, so I'm a sore loser. And again, I said, was that you after all? And he said, no, here's my truck. It's over here, and here's my key. I could show it to you. And I was like, okay. And I said, it's just that guy driving that truck. Like for me, I'm not talking about politics right now. Like that guy just almost hit me before, and I want to say something. And the guy said, well, I don't give a bleep, and went off on me again and just was going off. And so anyway, as all of this is happening, this transient appearing man came and stood and like made a triangle with us and didn't third person, very calm, didn't say a word, and he just stood there and looked at me and sort of like very faintly nodded his head, looked at the other guy, kind of nodded his head. And I look over, and this transient appearing man is wearing a hat that says, I am a child of God. Oh. And I'm like, all right, I know what to do now, which is to remember that I'm a child of God. And this guy was not backing down. He had I think it's the same guy, but I don't know. It doesn't matter. I walked away. And I restarted my run, and I went home because I was leading a Bible software webinar in about 15 minutes on the passage of love God and love your neighbor. I am a child of God. So there's an epilogue to this story. That was Act 2. So Monday, almost get run over by this truck. Friday, see the same truck. I think it's the same driver. I don't know. Dude goes off on me. I apologize. It's de-escalated by I am a child of God, hat man. And I kind of finish my run, or try to, and then I see the same guy that I had seen on Monday who was walking his dog with his wife. The guy who had like processed this with me. And I said, you're my guardian angel. You won't believe what just happened. I was like, remember on Monday when I almost got hit in the crosswalk and then I saw you and your partner, your wife walking your dog? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, wait, is it okay that I'm talking? Like, we don't even know each other. Hi, I'm Abram. He's like, hi, I'm Chris. I was like, can I tell you about this? So I told him the whole story and about how this guy was just going nuts on me. And as I'm talking to this guy, Chris, I said, I think this is the conundrum right now, is do we confront, do we walk away? Now, in that situation, if I see that truck again, I'm keeping a distance. I'm not engaging. I know that. That guy is not engageable for me. But it does raise this larger question of what do we do now when it comes to somebody like that, whether they voted for this current president or not. There are lots of people like that. The world's been like that. What do we do? And that's a hard question, and I'm not sure. But there are some things I am sure of, and that's what I wanted to share today. And they're all things that I learned from this just ridiculous story that spans multiple days. So here's what I'm holding to this week. The first thing is what that guy's hat said, I am a child of God. I am a child of God. So are you. We are children of God. That cannot change. John 1:12, yet to all who received him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. And we could go on a long list. Romans 8, all who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. We are God's children. 1 John 3, how great is the love of the Father that we should be called children of God. That's our identity. It says that is what we are. Dear friends, we are children of God. Matthew 5:9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And that silent man standing there with his I am a child of God hat, that was a peacemaker. And he was somehow divinely intervening with that message. Again, he didn't say a word. He didn't do anything but stand there with that message. And he was a peacemaker. He was the embodiment of that verse. Blessed are the peacemakers. And you'll know them because they're wearing hats that say, I am a child of God. And they're going to come de-escalate these ridiculous situations. And we are secure. Yeah, maybe. The message was for me, and I'm not 100% sure that was merely a human person. In fact, I would tilt on the side of that was more than that. That was, somebody else. We are all children of God, it says in Galatians, through faith in Christ Jesus. And we are secure in that identity no matter what somebody else calls us. I was receiving some other names in that moment, some other labels. And maybe you've received some other names, some other labels in your life. No matter how people try to get into your head and get into your face, all of us still are children of God. And I've been clinging to that this week. And Jesus makes clear, the reading we read out loud together, no one can snatch them out of my hand. No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. You are secure in Jesus. We'll sing this song in just a minute. I'm a child of God. Yes, I am. So that's the first thing I've been clinging to this week. Child of God. I am a child of God. That's who I am. You are a child of God. That's who you are. Nothing shakes that or ever could. Now, the second thing I've been clinging to and trying to do this week is to take my real feelings. I'm so glad people shared these in prayer already. To take my real feelings into God's presence and ask God what to do with them. We can take however raw our feelings are, straight to God and say, Lord, here, this is how I'm feeling. Now what? And we had a lament psalm last week that did that. And I have been oscillating between numb and furious, if I'm honest, and determined and just really sad. And then tired. I just want to go to bed. I read this beautiful book these last couple of weeks by a Harvard psychologist named Judith Herman. And it's called Truth and Repair, How Trauma Survivors Envision Justice. Truth and Repair, How Trauma Survivors Envision Justice. And she says that trauma survivors, especially if it's like physical or like a sexual assault, that trauma survivors, one way they envision justice is not by elevating into powerful positions people who have harmed others greatly. That's injustice. And it happens all the time. And I don't need to go into details on this. Like I said, this is not new. And whatever your political or partisan persuasions, and I honor whatever political diversity might exist in this church. Maybe there's not much, maybe there's more than I know. Great. Whatever your persuasions, that is not justice. That is not justice for somebody to commit multiple instances of harm against another and against people less powerful than him and still to be elevated into a high position. And that's what's so discouraging, this author says, to trauma survivors. And so I've been trying to understand this week through that lens of trauma, through that survivor lens, and it just makes me mad. Things break the way they do, and it feels like that harm is just repeated. And I'm finding it helpful not to push past that, actually. Not to say to myself, well, Abram, it's going to be okay. Because maybe it won't be. And besides, anger is not a sin. We were studying this in Bible study a couple months ago. Anger can be a God-given emotion that alerts us to pay attention, like something is not right here. So I'm allowing myself, and I would invite you to do the same if it is relevant to you. I'm trying to allow myself to lean into that anger carefully. We know anger can get us into trouble too. And so I'm taking it into God's presence. I don't want to just be by myself with my anger. It's not usually a good combination. So trying to take it into God's presence and say, all right, God, would you receive this? Would you hear this? Would you purify it as necessary? Would you refine it? Would you make sure it's properly directed? Would you decrease my anger if that's appropriate? And would you increase my anger if that's what's appropriate, oh Lord? And I'm asking God, what messages might you speak to me through this anger or anxiety or fear, fill in the blank? What messages are my body speaking to me about these emotions? And then figure out what's next. You can do that with the sadness, with the numbness. And I don't want any of us to just bypass those feelings because we think we're supposed to. Or because somebody on the internet thinks we're supposed to. Or because another pastor told you to. Or because some standards of polite society tell us that we just need to accept it. That is a message that people use to keep other people down, usually. And so I want to ask myself, and I want to ask God, what is the meaning of these feelings? And what do I do with them? I'll let Cynthia back in here. What is the meaning of these feelings, and what do I do with them? And so I take that to prayer. And I had just met this new neighbor, Chris, both on Monday and Friday. I think he was a human for sure, but I think he was divinely appointed. And who knows if I weirded him out. I can't wait till I see him again, because I'm just going to be like, Chris, great weather we've been having, right? How about them Celtics?
You again?
You again? Yeah. But I was so shaken up by this awful encounter that after I asked my new neighbor, is this okay? And he said yes. I just shared with him how I was feeling. I did not dress it up. I couldn't in that state. I was not pretending. I was feeling raw. And he listened to me. This guy I don't even know. It was awesome. It was such a gift. I'm sure he had to be somewhere else and do something else. But he listened. And how much more will the God who calls you child listen to you when you come to him raw and with whatever feelings you're feeling? Shaken up, beaten down, angry, devastated, despairing, wanting to move to Canada. Take it all to God. And I am sure that there are a lot of people who have handled this week better than I have, in more emotionally mature, spiritually mature ways. I would be the first to admit that. But this approach to take myself how I am, not how I think I should be, to take my whole self into prayer has been oddly encouraging to me and life-giving. I felt more held by God. I felt more free. I felt more open to others. I felt more real. And again, I'm no hero here, as you can tell. I'm not the hero of this story, but this has been helpful to me. And so as one, what's the saying, one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread, perhaps you would like to consider or give yourself permission, or if you need someone to give you permission, I'm not in charge of you, but give yourself permission to feel what you're feeling and to sit with it. Don't skip past it. Don't bypass it. Don't rush it. Take it into God's presence and just sit with it. And when you go to the Psalms, you're going to find every single emotion in there anyway. So maybe you are feeling fear, overwhelm, despair, betrayal, determination, maybe still some joy in there, some uncertainty. And if you go online after the service and just type in feelings wheel, I think they use it for like authors, but also therapists will use this, but it's this massive colorful wheel that it subdivides into like 60 different adjectives. So it's more than just mad, sad, afraid. It's like despairing, overwhelmed, discouraged, livid, disappointed. Very helpful. So you might even just type in feelings wheel and look through some of those emotions and take that to Jesus and just let him hold you there. And then when you're ready, ask God, what does this feeling mean? And then after that, when you're a little more ready, you can ask, now what, Lord? Now what? So we can take our real feelings, our whole selves to God. So that I've got 5 and the other ones are shorter. But the first one is, I am a child of God. I know that. You are a child of God. I also know that it's been very helpful for me to take my feelings as they are directly to God. The third thing is, I think this is a good time to remember our values. Remember our values. There's a journalist named Sarah Kendzior who has written about authoritarian states. And she predicted the 2016 election, which like nobody did. Well, I'm talking 2016, the last one. Well, 2 elections ago. And she was a real voice of clarity about how to keep your bearings when you are disoriented by things like misinformation, lies, would-be dictators, so on and so forth. Last year, Kenzier said, in times like these, holding on to your values is the most important challenge that you face. Holding on to your values is the most important challenge that you face. And so she suggested this exercise. This was 2016. She said, write down what you value. She said, what standards you hold for yourself and others, write it down. Write about your dreams for the future. Write about your hopes for our children. Write about the struggle of your ancestors and how the hardship they overcame shaped the person you are today. And she says, write your biography, write down your memories, because if you don't do it now, you might forget. We see that all throughout Scripture. Remember, Israel. Remember, people of God. Don't forget how the Lord brought you out of Egypt. It's all there. And the Bible is a lot of people living in hostile environments with authoritarian leaders, living in a world where people call evil good and they call good evil. And they're writing to remember who they are, who God has called them to be. They speak to each other, back to these one another's we've been looking at. They speak to each other with psalms and hymns and spiritual songs because they need to remember who they are. They need to remember whose they are too. Ephesians 4:1 says, live a life worthy of the calling you have received. In other words, remember who you already are in Jesus. So this is a time to remember our values. I think this is also a time, and this is number 4, kind of a certainty for me, listen to the voices of the suffering. Listen to the voices of the suffering. This is embedded into the DNA of this church, and we need to do it still today. And I pray for myself that my ministry, and I pray that this whole church would prioritize the voices of victims and survivors and the oppressed. And yes, the victimizers and the oppressors are in need of God's love too. But I want to listen first to the voices of ones who are suffering, because they're often the ones most affected by a big change like this. And Jesus modeled this in his ministry. That's who he went after. As we were processing my interaction on Friday, my new neighbor, Chris, he made the point that whether that guy that I saw on Friday outside of the truck and the guy that I saw inside of the truck Monday, he made the point, whether that's the same guy or not, people are feeling emboldened by this election to say and do really bad things. And I know this is a news-aware congregation, so I know you probably heard about the spate of racist text messages that went out to middle school students and Stoughton High School. I mean, this is local. So Sarah Kenzier says, if you're trying to figure out how to proceed, look to who is suffering. Look to those kids getting those text messages. She says, who is suffering? Who enables that suffering? Who excuses that suffering? And we got to look at ourselves in that sometimes. And she says, how do we abate that suffering? Like, how do we help stop that? And then we proceed from there. So we look to who is suffering. So I am a child of God. That's the first thing. Feel your feelings and bring them to God. That's the second thing. Third thing is remember our values. Fourth thing is look to the suffering. And finally, number 5 is love. I am certain of love. That webinar that I went to on Friday, that Bible software thing that I was leading about the Great Commandment, I had already planned that before I had this interaction. And I literally came in from my run, from my awful encounter with this guy on the street, the truck guy, and then my great encounter with the angel / Jesus / man wearing the I'm a child of God hat. And with my, second conversation with Chris, I literally came in from all of that, got a glass of water, stretched for 30 seconds, and rushed to log into this webinar because it was time. And I had to spend an hour. I got to spend an hour talking about the love of God, which was just what I needed. So let me read that passage for you. It's short. It's Mark 12:28 through 34. Mark 12:28 through 34. And I'm nearing the end. I know we're going long today. One of the experts in the law approaching, hearing them debating, and seeing that he answered them well, asked Jesus, which is the greatest commandment of all? Jesus answered, the greatest commandment is, hear, Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And this is the second great commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And the expert in the law gets it. He says, yes, that's right, teacher. I want to try to go do that too. Basically, I'm summarizing. And then Jesus says, you are not far from the kingdom of God. Then no one dared any longer to question Jesus. That's how that passage ends. So he got it. That was it. Love the Lord your God with everything you've got. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so I'm clinging to that. I'm clinging to these 5 things, and maybe some of them or all of them are helpful to you. I am a child of God. I can take all my feelings just as they are to God, and I'm not rushing past them. And I'm also saying, God, if you do actually want me to move on from this, please show me, and I will. If you want me to slow down and stay in this, please show me. Number 3, I want to remember my values. I would encourage all of us to do a writing exercise this week, even if it's just a minute. What's important to me? What do I want to hold on to? Number 4, I want to commit to look to the suffering. And finally, I want to love God and love my neighbor. I do not know what these next few years will be like. There is no shortage of people making their predictions. There are some things we can anticipate if we've been paying attention. It's not like this is totally unknowable. But we don't know for sure what's going to happen. And so holding on to these certain truths, I am God's child. I can come to God however I feel. I'm not going to change my values. In fact, now my Christian values, in fact, now may be a time to double down on them. I want to look to the suffering. And the best thing I can do, that all of us can do, is love God and love our neighbor. That's what I want to do. And I invite all of you to consider those. Again, take what I'm saying to God and say, God, is this what you have for me? And in the meantime, may God shower his love on us and hold us up as we walk ahead together into the future.